start right here. Abolish wasia. I am a Wasian Latino. I have used the term Wasian to describe myself in the past. I am functionally the ambassador to the Spanish Caribbean. That's my role within the Wasian government. And it is here that I have to announce that I am pushing for the abolition of the Republic of Wasia. It has gone too far. Listen, we were having fun. It was a silly little term. It was convenient shorthand for folks who are mixed with white and Asian of some sort. But there was always a problematic undercurrent that was going to pop up. And now I have to say we've jumped the shark. It has gone too far because folks are having Wasian meetups, guys. Folks are having Wasian meetups. This has copyrighted music. Folks are of all Wasian denominations have met up in San Francisco on May 9th. You can see this leans in a particular direction as far as which kind of Wasians were brought in, but you can see there was something of a Blasian there. I saw this tweet. I hate San Francisco. What do you mean you're at the largest gathering of Wasians ever? Summoning the Wasians. You can see, I believe that's Leve there. Largest gathering of Wasians ever. Olivia Rodrigo. Okay. That's technically Southeast Asia, so that makes sense. This was one of numerous meetups that sparked discourse. And today I'm going to try to break down what that discourse is. And I hope that people can understand, as somebody who has been considered Wasian, I'm not trying to shit on anybody on behalf of their ethnic background, but there are very significant limitations to identifying with specifically on behalf of your ethnic background, and especially on behalf of being mixed. As a matter of fact, this is a fun week because I have just recently covered a couple days ago situations with race in the Dominican Republic, which comes from my perspective as a Dominican. I am Dominican and Chinese, and this is a rare opportunity that I get to talk about both sides of my hyper-specific ethnic background. But there's also a lot of interesting stuff you can pick up from Dominican racial discourse that applies really sharply here. In particular, I have something written down. I was gonna get to this later, but why don't we just bring it now? What Latinos, and especially Latin Caribbean countries like the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico will show, is that celebrating mixedness, I wrote this, will always lead to privileging whatever the safest / lightest / most materially powerful race is in that mix, okay? So there's limits to celebrating your mixedness. We really are a yassifying race. I hate the internet. Looks like a Vote Blue meetup. I mean, I would hope so at the very least. I don't affiliate with the Boba Liberal Vote Blue crowd, but some of the vibes are actually giving maybe Vote Republican. We're going to get into it. So the conversation really took off when this artist, content creator, Mad Sai, stepped in and said, enough is enough. And they weren't the only one, by the way, but this was a big one.
We need to have a serious conversation about Wasians. So this past weekend, an event was hosted, marketed as a Wasian meetup, with hundreds of half-white, half-Asian people coming to attend and compete in look-alike contests of numerous Wasian celebrities. On the surface, this is completely harmless and a fun idea. However, the people that started this event are part of an organization called Half Asia Spring. Half Asia Spring, in their own words on their Instagram, said that their mission is to create half Asian meetups around the United States. However, every single video posted to this account only mentions Wasians. Every single flyer only mentions Wasians. It's only marketed as a Wasian meetup.
Twilight Zone music. Uh-oh. By the way, if it's half Asian instead of Wasian, if that's where we're going to reduce this to, I don't even count. I gotta get banished from the Republic of Wasia because I'm technically a quarter Wasian. This is where shit gets messy in terms of racial identity. It's almost as if those categories are arbitrary and colonial. Here we go.
So that begs the question, why are you marketing an inclusive mixed Asian community gathering when it's centered only around white mixed Asian people? It is currently API month and we are celebrating all Asian identity.
It's true. It's AAPI month. This is crazy. This is crazy, man. This is what we get for AAPI month. This is worse than H-Mart discourse.
But it's been apparently clear that this year has had the most spotlight on the Wasian identity, a term coined to refer to someone with one white parent and one Asian parent. We have talented athletes and performers like Alyssa Liu, Leve, Hudson Williams, Charles Melton, and so on. And we've seen Wasians surge to the top of pop culture. We've even seen Wasians being solely represented in our media, such as Leve's music video for Mad Women, which includes many of these Wasian celebrities which I just listed. On one hand, it makes me really happy, and it's genuinely beautiful to see people with Asian heritage succeed. And
you know, there's limitations here as far as this discourse about even just, oh, I'm happy to see Asians succeed. Because if you've been paying attention to how Hollywood does representation over the past few decades, biracial people are usually weaponized. They're weaponized as this particularly like cute alternative or cutesy way to represent a specific ethnic background, and yay, representation, but also more and more multiracial people and less quote unquote monoracial people. So there exists inequities on that in that respect. And then it also contributes to this project of then like depoliticizing and defanging the actual identities at play here and turning it more into this like beauty contest of who can mix into the American melting pot in the cutest way. Yes, Charles Melton is indeed fine. Oh, it's Haitian Heritage Month as well. Wow. I can't believe I didn't know that, but happy Haitian Heritage Month. But that's the thing. It's not surprising that whiteness is getting centered here. It's not surprising that people are laundering the idea of mixed Asian race and half Asianness to really just talk about Wasians. Even when they try to overtly say, oh, we're talking about anybody who is mixed with Asian, they're always putting forward who? Like Wasian people, whether it's Olivia Rodrigo, who's half white, half Filipina, whether it's Alyssa Leo, whether it's, sorry, I mispronounced that, Alyssa Leo, whether it's Hudson Williams, it always comes back to that, right? Now, as bad as this starts to feel, as this person said, there is some level of like benefit of the doubt you can give it and some level of fun you can have with it. I've used the term Wasian to identify myself before. I never try to be that serious about it, but it's a useful signifier. It's a useful term, okay? But now that things are getting more serious, it's time that we actually maybe bury this term for a while, because it's being used in this very duplicitous way that I think is contributing to, honestly, this very useless boba liberal racial narrative. You get videos like this. Who's your favorite Wasian?
I'd say Bruno Mars. I just found out that he's actually Wasian.
Well, Bruno Mars is Puerto Rican and Filipino. That's a tough slate for Wasian. But okay.
Pretty cool.
Favorite right now is definitely Alyssa Luau.
Alyssa Luau. Okay, look, I understand that Leo is not really like something that you pronounce in English, and so that's why Alyssa Liu is very clear about saying like, just call me Alyssa Liu, call me Alyssa Liu, fine. But trying to pronounce it authentically, so to speak, within the Chinese, as it would be pronounced in Mandarin, it's gonna trip up too many people. And this is what happened, right? We got people calling her Alyssa Leo. That's not the same thing as Leo. And now you got Alyssa Luau, which I mean, apparently that's like, I don't know if we're going to Hawaii or something. I don't know if that goes along with Bruno Mars as well, or
She is pioneering right now and absolutely killing it. I did ice skating also, and like still so young, and she's just such a badass and is setting the
I
precedent.
do like Alyssa Liu.
Okay.
He's my favorite Wasian.
Keanu Reeves. He's goated. That's Keanu.
He's goated, man. Keanu Reeves. All right, this is weird. When we get into the territory of like, who's your favorite Wasian? A lot of folks who support this kind of thing who are Wasian are going to first argue like, well, other people get representation. Other people can celebrate their races, but not us. Do you ever see people have black meetups where they're like, guys, who's your favorite black? Does that happen? Who's your favorite Chinese person? That's not really a very thoughtful way to talk about people of an ethnic background. In fact, it's a little bit, I don't know, objectifying, commoditizing. Insert big word here, insert buzzword here. My favorite Wasian, Hillary Clinton. Is Hillary Clinton Wasian? Don't tell me Hillary Clinton's actually Wasian. Puerto Rico. Whoa. Was the who's your favorite black thing sound kind of weird from my mouth? Who's your favorite black is wild word. But that's the comparison, right? If they want us to act like this is the same kind of thing, this is what you're doing. Who's your favorite black person? It's a dog whistle, right? Hot Cheerios, it's a dog whistle. I'll start also by, I also want to loop in like the importance of breaking down the media representation problem, which is a problem endemic to Asian American representation, to Asian American political discourse as well. We are not in a position in 2026 where we should still be like clamoring over representation in media. It is not the 2010s anymore. We have seen how people manipulate that and weaponize that. You're asking for crumbs from the empire and celebrating. Oh my gosh, Asian faces in high places. Now it's like, wow, half Asian faces in high places. What are we talking about? This is not solidarity. This is not liberation for our people at all. Our people are still suffering while people from upper class milieu celebrate that they see somebody that looks like them on TV. It's over for that. Okay, I'll actually play a little bit of this video that breaks it down pretty well.
Crazy Rich Asians came out, and every Asian person in the entire world had to pretend they loved it. That's a classic example of the move away from class-based exploitation towards identity-based discrimination. The reason why Asian people in America often have their top political priority being representation in media is because this allows them to have a radical veneer without ever confronting power themselves. In the 1960s and 70s, there was an academic cultural turn when Marxists in these fields moved away from traditional or orthodox Marxist analysis towards locating power in culture in order to explain a phenomenon called false consciousness. False consciousness was when workers refused to ally with the working class movement in order to prioritize their own individual needs above the collective. Once this cultural turn occurred, it really set roots in the 90s when people began to talk about identity-based discrimination as opposed to class exploitation. These academics were using the same radical language. However, it lost all of its bite because it inspired no action, no confrontation with the boss.
There's a lot to be said here. I could argue that certain like forms of identity-based activism existed well before this. They do tend to, pair up with like people of, more upper crust backgrounds, but also there is a necessity, as you might pick up, I think, from my channel. There's some necessity for explaining identity-based discrimination, especially when it comes to in solidarity movements and workers movements. There's a lot of traditions within the 20th and 21st centuries of explaining, failures of Western left, of the US left, and of the white left, and being able to represent for marginalized groups. But these Wasian meetups are so far from that discussion that it's not even funny. It's literally just disinterested even in having a conversation about class, or even conversations about sexuality and sex-based exploitation, having conversations about other forms of exploitation at all. It's literally just, wow, what a pretty person that looks kind of like me. Hell yeah, Wasians are up right now. And I'm sorry, but like, I'm not going to applaud you or pat you on the back for having that, especially when this idea like Wasians are up now, but they weren't before. It just doesn't make sense to me. We grew up with different Wasian celebrities in the 2000s. No, they weren't necessarily the biggest ones in the world, but like Michelle Branch, you're everywhere to me. She was Wasian. She is Wasian. Mike Shinoda from Linkin Park, Wasian. Kristen Crook from Smallville, Wasian. And there are multiple examples of this. So Vanessa Hudgens, Wasian, right? Curious that Vanessa Hudgens, who is like only slightly darker than the usual suspects when it comes to this conversation, somehow doesn't become the face of this kind of thing. But either way, this conversation is not like making much sense to me in terms of context. And yeah, as Shen Yvonne says, the conversations about the proximity to whiteness are not really happening in these spaces. They're not manifesting very well. As you can see, this is not the only Wasian meetup that we're seeing. There was another Wasian meetup in NYC.
Okay, there's a Wasian meetup in New York today. There was a party full with like 3,000 people. I'm meeting up with some of my friends and we're gonna go see the Wasian meetup. I'm coming out of the subway and I already found other Wasians. I want to We just saw the big clump. It's bigger than you think it is going to be.
Okay, maybe this isn't 3,000 people, but it's a lot of Wasians.
Oh my god, it's the Leve song again. I have to fucking mute this shit. I don't want to get copyright struck. More Wasian meetups are occurring. And again, like if we're just having fun, okay. But like, as you can see, sometimes we have fun and we get a little silly and then all of a sudden we mess up and we forget to put our thinking caps on. Because, and that's no disrespect to that person in particular, but when we talk about this organization that Mansai was talking about, for instance, Citizens of Wasia is now the term that they're using. It's still very focused on Wasia and Wasianness, and again, like this inability to bring other non-Wasian mixed Asian people into the fold and have real conversations about where those identities come from. Another thing is like we joke about being Wasian, but it's like not a real cultural marker. There's not like anything that connects me and somebody who is, like Leve, like mixed Chinese and Icelandic. There's not really a connection between somebody who's mixed I don't know, Filipino and, some type of European like Spanish. I mean, there's connections to some degree about even if that was when it comes to Spanish colonialism, but there's also huge differences. We also have a very big multitude of different lived experiences. There's not like a Wasian traditional music. There wasn't like a big Wasian radical activist movement. It's just, oh, you have one white parent and one parent from the Asian continent? Me too. The conversation also centers not just the white and Asian mixes, but it centers specific types of Asians who are East Asian and sometimes Southeast Asian, but you definitely don't hear about North Asian or West Asian or South Asian people coming up in these conversations at all. They're not put forward. They're not encouraged. They're not the faces that people are platforming. When we really talk about the political consciousness going on here or the lack thereof, this is where it gets really clear what the problem is, okay? This is one of the organizers, one of the hosts of the Wasian meetup event, responding to some Instagram comments. Somebody said, interesting, it's all East Asian and white. No other half Asians besides white. No half South Asians. And then this person says, there were folks there that were half South Asian too. We had Blasian, Gaysian, etc. And it's like, hold on. Are you insinuating that there is such a thing as half Asian, half gay? Did you just link in Gaysian and Blasian as if they're... What's going on here? What's actually going on here? What kind of racial category is Gaysian? What are we even talking about at this point? I think this is just a vibes-based meetup, and I wish you would just say that instead of trying to act like, oh no, we're actually inclusive. This actually is something meaningful, okay? Which, by the way, just have a silly Asian meetup. How about that? Have a silly Asian meetup with all the Asians, bring any Asians you want, and then just like joke around about little Asian stuff. I don't know. I could go so many places with this. More and more of these folks who are responsible for organizing these things. This was another Wasian meetup founder. Again, are showcasing a little bit of their ignorance here. So we'll talk about the post at play here in a second, but this particular host of one of the Wasian meetups shared it with the comment, this and hantavirus feels like 2020 all over again. I'm sorry, are you comparing criticism of the Wasian meetups to violent hate crimes against Asian people during the COVID-19 pandemic? I'm sorry, did I get that right? Have any Wasian people been like violently attacked by an Asian who was mad because they're Wasian? Like, is that something that's happening? Hantavirus hasn't even spread out. It was a story about a cruise ship that was worth monitoring and something that we should be a little bit concerned about for sure. What the hell do you mean this feels like 2020 all over again? The beginning of a pandemic in which millions and millions of people have died. What the fuck is going on? Like, actually, what's going on? Comrade Nika, Caribbean Asians unite, lighthearted. See, that would be an interesting conversation because there's a lot of Asian, East Asian, Southeast Asian, and South Asian migrants, immigrants in multiple different Caribbean countries. And I've actually always been fascinated by that, partially because I am one of those. My grandfather was a Chinese migrant to the Dominican Republic, and partially because there's a lot of stories about labor that are at play there. A lot of discrimination of like coolie labor, a lot of particular different types of life ways that were built in these countries, like the way in which South Asians have influenced a lot of Trini cuisine and culture, or Guyanese, etc., etc. This is not what I want. This Wasian thing is not anywhere close to that. I hated invincible, they say before attacking. Like, am I losing my mind? Third culture meetup. Yeah, we can have conversations about new cultural horizons being built, but none of this is actually being discussed as like a cultural exchange. There is no even conversation about like, okay, so what kinds of cultural things have you had to invent in your own experience? How did you, I don't know, combine the American cuisine with the cuisine of your Asian immigrant background in your own life? Or like, what kind of discrimination did you face? Like, I'm not saying everything has to be all serious, but if you want to take this as seriously as, I don't know, 2020, then we have to have a conversation beyond just like, look at these cute Wasians, you know? Shout out to Mad Sci for tracking this religiously. Now they're trying to spread this to LA. Again, this event is called LA Half Asian Maxing. Do y'all understand what's going on here? This is okay. This is from Looks Maxing, okay? Do I have to... We're literally just talking about like aesthetic eugenics shit now. That's where that term comes from. You're talking about clavicular shit. And you think it's cute to just utilize that and be like, oh, we're gonna max it. So it's not even just about, what is the implication? What is the implication at the lowest level? oh yeah, let's spread to create more half Asians. Does that sound normal to you? How do you max something that's half? This is a great question. Oh my goodness. That aside from the fact that, as we're going to talk about, it is very clear that all of this is about aesthetic. It's about beauty standards. It's about how you look. It's about looking like a Wasian. And it's about how cool it is to look like that, which is a very, very, let's say, problematic conversation. Again, I'm sure this Wasian crowd will be like, but you know, when black people say that they look better than white people, you guys don't get mad. But when Wasians, you know, when Wasian people insist that they're really good looking in a way that separates them from, I don't know, other Asian people, then you get mad. Yeah, I think I do. The creep of 4chan is ever present, Dupree. I'll take down my soy maxing screen name, sorry. I mean, listen, there are ways to satirize incel language, and then there is just, hi, let's make a celebrating half Asian people meetup, and let's call it half Asian maxing. And then also we'll make sure that everybody on the flyer is Wasian again. And it's always East Asian, Southeast Asian, and white all the time. OG Soulite, it's just a bunch of motherfuckers being proud to be products of eugenics. Okay. Now, the first thing we're going to do, I have a couple sections here to start to analyze this phenomenon. So if you're not entirely convinced by me, you think I'm just hating, stick around. Let me break some more things down for you. Let's start here with a concept that I will call the tragic biracial. The tragic biracial, okay? I get this term from the fictional character trope, the tragic mulatto, okay? Again, this is a term that is quite insensitive and pejorative to use in today's day and age, but also very historically significant. So as you can see, I'm taking from another Wikipedia article here just to give you guys the basics on this. This is a trope from American literature of a mixed race person of African American and white ancestry who experiences social marginalization due to his or her racial identity. So remember when we had the conversation about H Mart Gate and how I was talking about how important it is that we listen to black folks and their understanding of racialization and racism and their, you know, long history of critical race theory and pay attention to those things, because otherwise we are ignoring, for instance, in the Asian American community, different forms of racism that we are perpetuating and that are being perpetuated against us. Oh my God, Babilla is, I think, gonna edit this. You can put that clip in there.
Obama is a mulatto. That's the one drop rule.
This is about to be fun. So why do I bring up the trope of the tragic mulatto and the tragic biracial in this case? Because there is a victimhood narrative that a lot of Wasians are using in response to this critique of these very strange half-serious meetups and this attempt to crystallize Wasian as something to be celebrated in a way that is problematic. So for instance, there was a post by this Japanese Latino Instagram content creator named Arigato Aki titled "Start Wasian Hate. America's latest obsession with Wasians is more dangerous than you think." This is a wild title, but I see where Arigato Aki is going. We'll go over the slides really quickly. So why Wasian and why now? For those unacquainted, a Wasian is a person with white and Asian heritage. It's not new, but the popularity of it is insidious because the identity will always be defined in relation to whiteness. You can't be Wasian without the hard W, and that distinction matters more than it might seem. What is Wasian pride anyway? This is a really important question. Wasianness is hollow because it isn't rooted in anything beyond phenotype. There is no shared history, no cultural heritage that exists independently of the way they look. So again, like if we were going to talk about Indo-Trini people or Indo-Guyanese people, right? These are mixed Asian folks in different parts of the Caribbean. They have a specific cultural traditional lineage that developed in terms of integrating what they had from back home in India into the Caribbean and then adapting it. So you get Scotch bonnet and you get doubles and you get etc. etc. Wasian doesn't have anything to do with that. It's not that at all. It's just a term meaning you're white and Asian, right? Which again, like Bella Hadid is white and Asian, but Bella Hadid is never the person who gets shown here. And I'm sure that some of these Wasian folks would be happy to claim her because she fits a beauty standard as well. But even so, it's clear that this is a conversation about people who look a certain way, who have a parent that's one race and a parent that's another race. And that's it. And how we should be proud of that. What is there to be proud of in that case? What cultural traditions, what political traditions, what history, what shared lineage, what anything do we have? Even Hapa, right? Which is a term that gets misappropriated as far as people who are Asian American utilizing it when it's really probably a term that should just remain in the context of Hawaiian racial history. That has its own history, right? right? We talk about Asian laborers, East Asian laborers, Japanese laborers, as well as Native Hawaiians, indigenous Hawaiians, laborers who were, oppressed by the United States, and then the intermingling of them with white settlers. That's just like Philosophie Noire. Yay for us being part white is basically what I'm hearing. That's essentially what you get when you're not actually talking about some sort of cultural lineage, right? JL brings up an interesting point. Why are Wasians glorified? My take is because they're both model cultures, at least in Western nations. Whites being the obvious and Asians being the model minority. And I don't think that's a stupid take at all, right? There is no sense of having to talk about a history. There is no sense about having to talk about, resistance to oppression, or a sense of having to talk about the politics or the culture of it, aside from when it's convenient to defend yourself from criticism, because we should just know that being mixed with white and East Asian is a good thing. We should just know that. It's like, futurism. We're the future. And Arigato Aki, also says there is a shared element of feeling you don't belong in either culture in the Wasia world that even I can relate to. The Wasian label gives that feeling a specific name and a community. I even spoke to a 40-year-old Wasian mother at the event. She lit up describing what it meant to finally see so many people who looked like her, something she'd never had growing up in Texas. But if Wasia is meant to encompass the vastness of mixed Asian identity, then we are in desperate need of a name change. You cannot include whiteness in your label and then claim to represent everyone, right? So this is a big mix-up, and it's also like, while I understand, especially even for older folks, how it might be pretty cool to see people who are mixed in the way that you are, if the point is how people look and then seeing how they look and then being happy about it, what's the point of having a convention? Why don't we just all show up, smile, and then go home, right? Why does the conversation always end at how we look, right? Yeah, they had cutouts of all the different Wasians there. What Icelandic singer, we'll get into this a little bit later, actually. Now, the reason I bring up the tragic biracial sort of terminology, which again, I borrow from the tragic mulatto trope, is because, and I hope that this isn't offensive to any of the black folks in the chat, or mixed black folks in the chat, and that they understand where I'm getting at here. You can see that there is a specific narrative that Wasian folks are developing in the chat, in the comment section. Okay, so no mixed people should celebrate being mixed. Got it. This person, I'm half Korean, half white. This post argues that Wasian identity is dangerous, hollow, and rooted in nothing but phenotype. And I genuinely disagree with almost all of it. The shared experience of navigating two cultures, feeling too white for one side and too Asian for the other, growing up in households split between two completely different worlds, that is a cultural reality. That's not about how you look. That's about how you're raised, how you're perceived, and how you learn to move through the world. Also, this is definitely written with AI, because it's got that that formatting of like, that's not this, that's this. Okay. Monoracial Asians literally have billions of people on the planet who look just like them. If mixed race people want to gather and bond over shared experiences because we make up less than 1% of the population, it's hardly dangerous. It's literal hell growing up biracial in America. Do you see this is exactly the point of exactly the problem with this tragic biracial narrative. You have to compare it against monoracial people as like less oppressed than you. Also, like the idea of white culture, right? Or Asian culture. What is Asian culture? It's a massive continent with so many different cultures and countries. Are you Muslim? Okay, so then you don't speak for most of Asian culture, right? It just doesn't make any sense. But that's the whole thing though. This idea, you guys have billions of people who look like you. Okay, well then stop Asian hate. That just doesn't really matter as much as like stop Asian hate then, right? Because if what matters is that people look like you, then that's the marker of who's the most oppressed. Then, we should just pack up the whole Asian American political movement and go. I mean, apparently a lot of y'all have done that anyway. You see a similar problem that occurs, as Philosophie Noire points out, within, the black community, as far as you can observe, where it's like you have this narrative from certain biracial black and white folks that they have suffered from something that monoracial people, quote unquote, could never understand. Oh, we're hated by black people and we're hated by white people. And black people, you guys are just one culture. So you just get to, It's a shared struggle. You're racialized, right? And the way that you're racialized is very much a systemic thing that oppresses you on behalf of whatever racial, category you have that's the most oppressed, right? So the black struggle is the biracial black struggle, and the Asian struggle is the biracial Asian struggle. Those are just particular corners of it. How could you say like, oh, Asians, you guys have each other? Do you not remember the legacy of World War II? Most Asian people don't have much in common. Okay, and they have a lot of beefs in between them from very serious trauma. And the idea that they're like this one group of people that could all get along and unite, it just doesn't make any sense. That's aside from the fact that ethnic ambiguity is not something that you can only have if you have a white parent and an Asian parent, or a white parent and a black parent. So OG Soullight says, I've had MFs tell me I can't be just black simply because of my skin and hair. Dead ass. Then I tell them I have 2 black parents and they still insist I must be mixed. It's annoying. Ethnic ambiguity is not an ethnic category. Racial ambiguity is just something people assign you depending on how you pop out. It's all aesthetics. It's all how you look. Can you imagine Grey Art complaining about being half white in America? Like, the amount of out of touchness, like, it's hard to know where to begin. So this is where I bring in Candy Corn's video. Some of you guys recommended their work before. I'll just let this play for a little while to give also further context on this whole rise of Wasians and the limitations of it as anything that could be liberatory or good for us.
Cool now?
Oh.
Now? I don't know about y'all. Are Wasians cool now? I don't know about y'all, but I've been seeing a lot of rep for us lately, and I have a lot of mixed thoughts about this as a mixed Korean and white person. One of my hot takes is that I think nearly no Asian is white passing if you actually know what Asians look like. White people are starting to lose all credibility in these conversations when they start to say that Lola Tung, Hudson Williams, and Alyssa Leo were white passing. So let me tell you again that there's a difference between white passing, which means looking so white to the degree that you can't pass for any other race. We're also going to acknowledge the loaded history and context this has in predominantly black communities, and the term white presenting, which means having traits that exist in proximity to whiteness. That could be lighter skin, hair, eyes, etc. And I would personally consider myself white presenting at times. I never once passed for white growing up, and the white kids in my small town made sure I always knew this with constant racist bullying. And it's really only the past few years if I started dressing more alt, getting tattoos, dyeing my hair, that people have started to tell me that I'm white passing. I don't agree with this. As someone who has Korean facial structure, naturally dark hair, and has lived with the surname on my whole life, the reality is most non-Asian people don't know what we look like, let alone being able to tell the difference between different Asian ethnicities. I've had white people swear on their lives that I look like Lisa Liu, Brenda Song, Jackie Chan, Kim Jong-un, Jet Li, some random Asian person I know, and my personal favorite, Olivia Rodrigo. I do not. And hot take, I think a white person calling someone white passing has nothing to gain from that interaction other than enforcing a racial power imbalance. We do benefit from our proximity to whiteness, but you are not the person to point that out as the one who always benefits from that system. And someone's appearance does not negate their cultural identity. You don't have to look Asian to be Asian, but we do need to call these conversations out for what they are, a symptom of white supremacy culture. We have this fascination with, 1, needing to know the ethnicity of people who don't look like us, and 2, having to categorize or describe that in proximity to whiteness. And both of these are inherently harmful because they always assume that whiteness is the default or normal. And it's no coincidence that Wasians are becoming more popular because of this proximity to whiteness. It's very intentional. These are East Asian mixed and light-skinned people. We rarely see South Asian or mixed Malaysian identities, and that's because of colorism. And hotter take, I hate the term Wasian. I hate white people using it especially, but even Asian people using it because it feels like a way to enforce white supremacy on us. Like, we hardly have any other words to describe mixed identities like we do with Wasian, and I think that's largely because people are so eager to categorize and uplift identities that are proximity to whiteness. And while mixed white Asian people have always been a part of this community in AAPI month, I do think we need to learn to take a step back from these conversations as the ones who are most privileged in this community. I think so many of us are desperate to feel belonging, not white enough to be exempt from racism, but not Asian enough to feel a part of that community either. That a lot of us take their frustration out on Asian communities for not fully accepting us. And while I completely empathize, we need to be asking ourselves.
A lot of great points were made there. And one of them goes to something that a couple of folks have talked about in the chat too. That idea that you're in a third culture, that's not something that only happens if you have mixed race identity, like at all. If you're a child of immigrants, right? Like 2 African immigrants in the United States from the same place, from the same tribe, you're a third culture baby. You don't have a connection fully with your homeland and your home tribe in the same way that other people might because you've been in the United States. So this idea like, oh, you guys have no idea what it's like, right? You know, I don't know if I have the how am I going to word this? I know somebody who is that exact background, born to 2 African immigrants from the same tribe, that migrated to the United States, born and raised in the United States, and had a biracial person tell them, you just have no idea what it's like to feel like you're not part of one world, but you're not part of the other one either. And like, they just had to burst out laughing. Like, what an absurd thing to assert about somebody. Because you really think that all of these immigrant kids that have been born in the United States feel completely connected with the place that their parents migrated from? That doesn't make any sense. That doesn't make any sense. Nor do they feel like they're completely American at all. They're not exactly accepted or represented or platformed or whatever word you want to use as like the stereotypical American. And this is ultimately a white supremacist country, right? But biracials, like myself, oftentimes forego trying to identify with who we consider monoracial. We just love to assume, because it's very convenient, that we're the only oppressed people because we're mixed. And then when we talk about it and we clearly act in a way that doesn't take into context where we come from and that ignores the ways in which our struggles are basically connected with all these different people, then we start to act like we're the most oppressed because like these people just don't understand. They can't possibly understand our pain. Meanwhile, you would learn a lot more about what you're suffering from if you study the struggles of the specific Asian background you came from than you would by just being like, I'm Wasian, it's unique. I'm Wasian, it's unique. I'm Wasian, it's unique. Like, get a grip. Like, how many biracial black people in the United States have had essentially no trouble standing for and standing with and seeing themselves within the Black American struggle and the Black American radical tradition, despite the fact that they're mixed, and understand partially like they have privileges and there's some specific challenges to having mixed ancestry, but also that at the end of the day, the Black American struggle is theirs. In the same way for all of you Asians, the Asian American struggle, which was forged in combination with and inspired by the Black American struggle, was created for people like you. And instead of embracing that and embracing like, I have Chinese roots and this is what happened to China in the 19th century, they were oppressed, they were colonized by the West. A lot of Chinese migrant workers came to the United States and they were oppressed here and they restricted immigration, and the United States was virulently racist against Asian people and still are. And when Trump says da da da, he's being racist against Asians, da da da, instead of seeing that as like, yeah, that's my struggle, you're like, that's not quite my struggle because I am white, you know, and like that's its own thing. Like, you're selling your own people out by pretending because you're a little bit mixed that you're not the same people, right? Pretending that because you have a mixed background and that does create, you know, specific personal experiences, pretending that that makes you so different so as to require your own pride, your own separate day. And it's just like, you're not actually going to have that separate day and that separate pride if you're not willing to actually unpack how fucked up and racist that is, okay? So let's get into some of the ways in which that's fucked up and racist. Why are Wasians having this moment? What is it about Wasianness that is so interesting and so fun and so beautified, right? Let's start here. Oriental trinkets, okay? I like to call this Oriental trinkets or Oriental trinketism. Oriental trinkets, Orientalist decoration in the Labubu matcha era. Okay, so there is a long history in the United States and throughout the West, especially throughout the West, of exoticizing East Asian subjects, Orientalist subjects in 19th century painting. Exoticism in decorative arts and interior decoration was associated with fantasies of opulence and barbaric splendor. Okay, this is from the Met Museum. So whenever you have even the idea of fine china, right? It's so normalized to just call it china. Oh, my mom has china in the cabinet, which not necessarily wrong with it because it's an old term, right? But have you ever thought to yourself, you know, why is it called china? It can't be like the root word of it, right? I mean, the term is dishware. The term is your good dishware, right? But they called it china because specific porcelain coming from East Asia, from China, porcelain dishware that was either imported from or inspired by East Asian art and porcelain trade became a huge signifier of wealth and status among Westerners. Right? So that's why fine china becomes a big thing. And this is just one of many different ways in which Orientalist decoration becomes a huge part of the imperial aesthetic, okay? European interest in non-Western art was first stimulated by trade with the East in the 16th and 17th centuries. As more Europeans traveled beyond established routes of the Grand Tour, their experiences abroad began to influence their tastes at home. Many non-Western forms and ornamental motifs have found their way into the vocabulary of European decorative arts, okay? And this ranges from a lot of different types of intentionality, okay? Some people would just find it pretty or find it interesting, or from their experiences engaging with these folks, these peoples, or going to these parts of the world, maybe they wanted to bring something with them, whatever. But there's also a lot of it that is frankly exoticizing in the exact way that we come to know exoticization as a bad thing, okay? Exoticism in the decorative arts and interior decoration was associated with fantasies of opulence and barbaric splendor, in the words of the English explorer, linguist, and writer Sir Richard F. Burton. The arts of the East were also considered quaint and uncorrupted by industrial capitalism. While English critics complained about the lack of integrity and poor design in the utilitarian goods that were being produced in their factories, they exalted the arts of pre-industrialized nations and held them in great esteem as supreme examples of good design. Because of their purity of design, Islamic ceramics, Indian textiles, and Japanese prints were considered aesthetically superior to European goods, which aimed for commercial novelty. So there's a lot more here. Motifs from Turkish ceramics, even parts of different parts of Eurasia. Also chinoiserie, which is the which is the pseudo-Chinese decorative style that became popular in the 1700s and that ended up influencing people like Vincent van Gogh. All this is really colonialism, right? At the end of the day, it's still just colonialism, because it's still just the idea that like, oh, you know, our culture with how developed it is now, with how much development and industry we have, we no longer have beauty. You know, we know our arts are tainted, and so let's import and copy the art that's created in the East. You know, where they're not as developed, where it's not as industrialized, right? And even where there are, you know, genuine like strands of legitimacy to this, like for instance, the way that Japanese streetwear and Japanese denim still hold out a big part of like, you know, fashion culture because of their you know known quality, something that has really kind of changed a little bit over the past few years, but you know, still is a huge part of the streetwear culture. At the end of the day, it's weebs. It's weebism, right? Somebody said it's like weebs, right? Or it's a return to nature trope, like CC Boy says, right? The colonialist or the colonizer takes so much interest in what is exotic. They like to take it because it feels more human and it feels more artistic. And in some ways it is, because the colonizer's culture is colonizer culture, right? It is what people will joke now as spiritually Israeli. So the colonizer's culture is focused in profit or focused in whatever else. It is barbaric and violent. So instead they project that onto like the barbarous noble savages of other parts of the world, especially the Asian stuff. This is part of what's talked about in a famous book called Orientalism, a book by the Palestinian writer Edward Said. Palestine, part of Asia. A lot of you forgot that. A lot of you don't know that. Edward Said. Obviously, people know about this book. I won't talk about it too much. It does also mostly focus on the Middle East, right? This, you know, even art like what's on this cover, the snake charmer, right? Or, you know, Kutcha Khanum, you know, the sex worker that was fetishized in one particular French person's book about traveling to the East. These things made up a huge part of the West's creating an image of the East, which, you know, that's the idea that they came up with in the first place. Oh, the West and the East. Essentially creating this dangerous, but also beautiful, exotic, but also scary other that had to be conquered and colonized, but also extracted gently from, you know? So all of this is coloring the same exact things that happen now when you guys talk about matcha and labubus and Asian shit and your anime girlfriend in the same way that you know, downplay your own American or Western cultures and instead, you know, exoticize and deify Eastern cultural stuff and Eastern art, right? It's just the same shit happening over and over again, right? The perfect example of this is the becoming Chinese trend, okay? I didn't end up talking about it very much, but this is a great opportunity for me to chime in with it. A lot of y'all took this like Chinese century, oh, America's downfall, and turned it into Orientalism again. Oh, well, if we could just become more Chinese. Oh, you know, I'm actually drinking a warm beverage instead of a cold one because it's better for you. This is like secret Asian knowledge, secret Chinese knowledge, okay? All this is the same thing. You're using Asian culture, which is its own bizarre term, right? You're using, in this case, Chinese culture as a decoration to signify your taste, to signify you knowing ball, okay? And to signify your own interest in other cultures in a way where you exotify them. And so you therefore put them on this pedestal that in actuality is a colonial gate, okay? By pretending like, oh yeah, the Chinese are so much better, they're so advanced. You're just doing the same thing as when people are like, oh, Chinese are so backwards. It's the same kind of exoticizing. It's the same type of dehumanizing way to view a culture from a different part of the world that you ultimately are participating in othering, you know? And so when we talk about Wasianness and Wasian beauty and Wasian pride, this is one of the key points of it, right? To be Wasian is to be a white person with a little bit of flavor. It's to be a white person with a little bit of MSG, okay? That is ultimately, in terms of the beauty standard, which becomes very important here. We'll talk about it a little bit more. In terms of the beauty standard, in terms of what's so interesting and exotic and exciting about Wasianness, it's really just this. It's really just the fact that people are finding a lot of Wasian people hot, and fine, hot people are hot. But instead of being normal about it, we have to turn it into this thing of like, are Wasians on the rise? And pretend like it's this progressive movement or inclusive thing, when in actuality, it's just, yeah, the beauty standard favors seeing white people and East Asian people as cute or pretty or hot. This is especially true when it comes to Wasian women and the way Wasian women are looked at. But it also applies now in a post-K-pop rise landscape to somebody like Hudson Williams. Hudson Williams can simultaneously be beautiful in the white male American beauty standard or the Western beauty standard because he's tall, because he's jacked, because he has, you know, a pretty chiseled face and a lot of the features that would be considered beautiful in the West. But also he has some of the Eastern features as well. The shape of his eyes or the shape of his nose that also could make him pull off doing a little K-pop. You know, if he wanted to do a little eye makeup and do a little K-pop dance, people would be like, oh my God, he's so hot. He can play in both worlds, and both worlds only serve to bolster capital, to bolster this same beauty standard. I won't say he's chopped. I will not say Hudson Williams is chopped. I'm not attracted to him. I don't think he's not my taste, but that doesn't matter. The point is, of course, Hudson Williams is having a moment. He's a jacked, hot, white and Asian guy. When has that ever been shocking? The Asian part is only somewhat shocking now because of the fact that Asian men have historically been, you know, seen as not masculine or whatever. And a lot of Asian guys took that shit and ran with it in the 2010s and 2020s. Oh my God, you know, Asian men are always seen as... Listen, I suffered from that shit too. I got discriminated against because I'm an Asian guy too. A lot of you guys are just making that your whole personality and pretending like it's praxis, pretending like it's progressive. It's not. A lot of it is just you having an excuse to think, well, if I just focus on being hot, then I have good politics. That's not how it works. And it's like, this is the thing, is like, of course, the beauty standard has always worked like this, and it's just adapting now to reincorporate the same old Orientalism, which is endemic to K-pop as an industry, by the way, with this new flair now that K-pop boys are such a hot commodity or whatever. Is Hudson the top? I think that they both switch, but I'm not positive. I do know that there's a political discussion to be had there. So let's move on. Okay, we got a lot to say. There's also a quote from a friend of mine who I will refer to as A, my friend A, who says, you know, they feel as if the term Wasian has been used to accessorize conversation instead of contextualize experience. Shout out to A. But this is the thing. Wasian became a term that people just started throwing around. There's something Wasian about this. Oh, my Wasian boyfriend. Oh, if only I could get a hot Wasian girl. Oh, this is like, look at all the rising up of the Wasians. Da da da. Republic of Wasia. Da da da. And instead of getting anything from that as like, oh, maybe we're having conversation about specific immigrant groups and their dynamics in the United States or the model minority myth or da-da-da. It's just a reference to something that nobody actually wants to talk about any deeper. What does it mean to be Wasian? What does it mean to be Wasian? We never talk about this because it's just a simple little category we just throw on that adds a little bit of flavor and makes a joke work. But when we talk about these experiences, right? I want to highlight this tweet by somebody named The Darkening. No one's talking about how Alyssa Liu's dad is a Chinese eugenicist who biologically engineered all his kids to be Wasian despite having an Asian wife. That is 100% true. That is 100% true. And I think it's the same with Eileen Gu, but I'm not positive. You're talking about Asian dads, Chinese dads who did the scientific insemination thing, egg donor thing, in order to reproduce Wasian babies because they would have good genetics to succeed within the United States. This is true. Look it up. Look. Oh my God, this is a wild thread. Alyssa Liu's existence proves that eugenics is a good thing, even if it makes me feel bad. Oh, whoa. This is a complex post. Alyssa Liu's dad became a single father of 5 children via surrogacy. He always wanted kids, so the Chinese-American lawyer decided to become a single father and use anonymous egg donors and surrogates to have 5 children on his own. 5 children. These are the kinds of conversations we gotta have if we're gonna start talking about Wasianness, okay? As Delta Nova says, it's the Asian version of mejorar la raza. Did he use some of his genetics or was it all donor-based? I think he used some of his genetics, but I'm not positive. Regardless, these are the kinds of conversations we could be having if we were having conversations about interracial relationships, about eugenics, about colonialism, about any of these things. And that would do a lot more to talk about, making people feel like they can belong and feel represented and understand themselves better, more so than just Wasian, ha ha ha. Yeah, it's quite shocking. It's quite shocking. Rich people from Cali, especially in the Silicon Valley area, yeah, there's something else. They're really something else. So this is literally eugenics. And it's not a surprise that eugenics is at play, right? Because ultimately, when you're talking about specific racial mixtures being superior or being cool or being beautiful, you're having a Sydney Sweeney eugenics conversation, okay? And this is why we also have to talk about Wasian baddies. Desirability as Wasian identity. So if we're not going to talk about history, if we're not going to talk about colonialism, if we're not going to talk about culturally integrating different things if we're not going to talk about a person's lived experience, if we're only going to talk about, wow, looks, well, it's not a surprise then that desirability is central to Wasianness. And this is where we have to talk about Leve, okay? And I'll pull up the Arigato Aki post again. Leve exclusively featured fellow Wasians in her Mad Woman music video, framing it as representation. Growing up, I felt a general lack of representation for people who looked like me in music and media. But representation of what exactly? A phenotype? Because if Wasian identity begins and ends with aesthetics, that's eugenics. So it'd be one thing if it was a conversation of, oh yeah, not a lot of Asians represented in media. Again, separate conversation about why that's weak in terms of building actually, formative politics that can help us. But when it comes to Wasian looks, it's not a surprise that the main way that people will react is by talking about how hot Wasian people are. And that's really what all of this is about. The top comment on this video, she collected all the Wasian baddies like Pokemon. So this is really about baddies, isn't it? This is really about people being baddies, right? And you're right, OG Soul, that's literally eugenics, customizing your baby, right? Why would you customize your baby? Why would you say, specifically, whether it's through insemination, through egg donors, or whether it's through sperm donors, or whether it's through, I'm going to date a person who is white, or I'm going to be white and date a person who's Asian so that I can have Wasian babies? Why would you do that? So that your kids could be hot, right? Or so that in Alyssa Liu's case, she could be, able to perform athletically or whatever. These are not exactly qualities that smell good, okay? These are very smelly, stinky things to pursue. Chinyere Sampson, thank you for the $10 donation. I always thought racial preferences in dating were the product of characteristics of a race being favored because of a racist society. Yes, that is exactly what racial preferences in dating comes down to. And I had a video about it a long time ago on the Elliot Sang channel, right? So when it comes down to Wasian pride, what you hear folks ultimately saying over and over again is basically, we're hot. Wasians are hot. Right? And, more from Mad Sai. Rumor has it that in the official Discord server for one of these Wasian meetup communities, somebody in particular is saying they're basically just using eugenics talk. This person said, the Discord server for Wasia itself is often doing weird things in which the people are gassing each other up for being beautiful because they're Wasian. I'm beautiful because I'm Wasian. Oh my God. And then putting down non-Wasian mixes as they're just jealous or they want to be us so bad. Oh my God. Oh my God. Racism. Obviously, it's not everyone, but I've seen it enough times just randomly opening the server. Some of us are branching off and connecting with other non-Wasian mixed Asians and starting a new server to be genuinely inclusive because that old one is absolutely not a safe space. Between the Wasian baddies or they hate us because they ain't us. There's really, first of all, a prioritizing of how hot Wasian people are. Sorry, I got choked. I choked because a fly flew into my mouth because of how horrifying this is. Queen Eek says, the pride in Wasianness isn't too dissimilar from the recent popularity and exotification of Brazilians. White supremacy has created a lane for a certain aesthetic to be accepted as desirable. They use, again, the language or the same kind of inclusivity talk or pride talk that is lifted from Black Americans, for instance, which no shocker that Asian Americans would appropriate Black Americans, so that they can be like, well, if Black people can say, we're so beautiful, Black is beautiful, you're jealous because you're not Black, then why can't we say they're jealous of us because we're Wasian and beautiful? And I went over this before, but it's just so you're literally saying Asian people are jealous of you because they're fully Asian and you're white, and that makes you hotter because they don't have as much white as you do, and since you're more white, you're hotter. I just don't. What am I supposed to call that if not white supremacy? What are we supposed to call that, right? And this brings me back to my point from earlier. Again, somebody brought up Brazilians in the chat. I brought up Dominicanness, and I had a conversation about Dominicanness earlier this week. Celebrating mixedness will always lead to privileging whatever the safest or lightest or most materially powerful race is in the mix, right? Celebrating mixedness is just a simple hop and a skip away from racism, because it's not the same thing for Black Americans to celebrate Blackness, given that we are talking about actual cultural, historical, political traditions. It's not the same thing even for Asian people to celebrate being Asian, especially in the context of the US being Asian American, because Asian Americans do have a shared history. They do have a shared history from which they have shared experiences. Vincent Chin, right? If you know who Vincent Chin is, a Chinese American factory worker who was killed in the 80s by two white men because they said it's guys like you that are destroying our jobs, that are destroying our company. You're the reason we can't get any work. Why did they say that to Vincent Chin? Because Japanese motor companies were taking up the international motor vehicles market. They confused him with a Japanese dude. Right? How many times did Vietnamese or Cambodian or Korean or Japanese people experience racial harassment during COVID-19, which is still ongoing, but during the beginnings of the pandemic in 2020 and 2021, just because of racism against Chinese people? Right? So the reason the Asian American movement was founded by radicals, by the way, was because it was those folks coming together in solidarity with their shared experiences, okay? And especially for those who are not necessarily connected with the home country, second generation, third generation Japanese Americans, Chinese Americans, having Asian American creates a category through which they can identify a different specific experience. But you still have to be careful when you do that, as you can see with the different failures of the Asian American movement, because grouping in all these different people together as Asian and excluding certain people from that title of Asian despite being Asian, that creates a lot of problems. So to talk about Asianness, I mean, come on. Come on. But it's just endemic, right? It's literally endemic. You know, if you go on TikTok, you might run across a TikTok like this. Just be Wasian. Brutal. Why is it brutal? Because look at how hot the Wasians are. Oh my God, look at these hot Wasians. Wow. Oh my gosh, they're so beautiful because they're Wasian. Wow. Beautiful Wasians. Oh, tough trying to be Wasian in this world. I'm going to I was going to say something that was going to get me thrown off of YouTube. So let's just leave that right where it is. It's aesthetics. It's beauty standards. It's the fact that you can conform pretty well into the white supremacist beauty standard and into Orientalism, and you can wield those things, and that you also can predominantly come from upper middle class backgrounds. That's what you are finding cultural pride in. Okay. And of course, yeah, most Wasians don't look like that. Okay. I mean, I don't like to talk like this, but like some people might call themselves chopped Wasians. And for them, they might feel like, hey, what the fuck? What about us? You know, it really does feel like we're talking about dog breeds. And we are. It is dehumanizing discourse, right? So to conclude, let's talk about the depoliticization of Asian America and all of us. Okay. Going back to that Instagram post from earlier, you can see that all of this comes from not just a lack of political education, but a resistance towards political education. If you know anything, for instance, about the amount of, race mixing between Japanese and white men, Japanese women and white men that happened, post-Korean War or post-World War II, you would look at this and feel icky. Just basic education stuff, right? Damn, who's fighting in the chat? Oh, they're fighting in the chat. Oh, whoa. Okay, I guess we're going to just do this for 2 minutes. Lara Raj can simultaneously experience some discrimination because she is a darker skinned Indian woman, and also have privilege in many regards because of her Eurocentric features, some of which came from surgery, and also her not being black and not being weaponized against, for instance, Manon, who is a black member of the group, or was a black member of the group. But this is what I'm talking about, like Cat's Eye set us back 100 years. Okay, and Seraphim, you agree with her. Okay, so what's the problem? What's going on here? Look at how Cat's Eye is tearing us apart, bro. Anyway, let's remember again who the real enemy is. More from the NYC Wasian meetups. Okay, more from the Wasian meetups. This one from the NYC Wasian meetup WhatsApp group. Real question: if we accept transgender people, oh man, have a good day, everybody. This is a great stream. Guys. Just taking my fucking rings off. Taking my rings off. Have a great stream, everybody. This is really fun, See y'all on Tuesday. Oh my goodness, bro. How did the trans folks get lumped into this? I mean, I'm assuming there are Wasian trans people that might have. I'm gonna try to work through this. If we accept transgender people, is it a big stretch to accept transracial people, cis race people identifying as race other than their birth race? I am for a big tent and welcoming anyone authentically identifying as a Wasian. Oh my God. But it's important to consider authenticity and real shared experiences with race and identity. What even created this conversation? Now, look, sometime maybe this person got booed off the chat. I don't know. But like the idea, like we're going to have these conversations about Wasianness with such little political education leads to people start asking questions about, well, what if somebody's transracial, right? As if transracial is a thing and can be compared to, as if race and gender are... Like literally trans folks are just trying to live, bro. I don't understand what's going on here. But yeah, I want to just recommend some reading. How about that? How about we recommend some reading? This book just came out by Scott Kurashige called American Peril, The Violent History of Anti-Asian Racism. You know, it goes over a swath of things. There's stuff here about the 19th century imperialism of China and Japan. There's stuff about immigration restrictions and migrant labor in the 20th century, the railroads. There's the Japanese American internment camps. Remember? You guys remember that happened? Remember when we locked up a bunch of Japanese Americans because we don't know what they could be plotting? Remember the 20th century anti-communism? We talk about that quite a bit. Remember the Korean War? Remember Vietnam, Laos, okay? Hawaii. We got the model minority myth post the civil rights movement and how Asian American identity became a wedge to drive in against Black people and to hold Black people down and to destroy the civil rights movement and its gains and solidarity between Asians and Black folks. Vincent Chin, we just talked about, that has to do with globalization widely and the ways in which Japan became this essential vassal state of the United States, through which it developed this massive capitalist system that ended up both disenfranchising American workers and leading to massive racism, hence against Japanese workers and Japanese companies, while also leading to massive income inequality in Japan, is put pretty well and pretty neatly and covered in this book by Scott Kurashige, who is a student of and a former, ally with and a member of the Foundation for Grace Lee Boggs. Grace Lee Boggs, who passed away in 2015 at the age of 100. If you don't know who Grace Lee Boggs is, Grace Lee Boggs was a radical Marxist feminist who was a key ally in Black liberation, who helped found the Asian American movement and other social justice movements. And those movements were founded on class-based solidarity. They were founded on anti-capitalism. They were founded on anti-imperialism, which of course leads to all this immigration to the United States from East Asia, which then leads to the anti-Asian legislation towards more and more Western casual racism against Asian people, all this, right? So please look up Grace Lee Boggs, who, by the way, was married to James Boggs. That's where she got the name from. James Boggs was a really crucial American Marxist political activist, a Black Marxist who wrote this really good book, The American Revolution, Pages from a Negro Worker's Notebook. So these movements of Black solidarity, Black American struggle, and Asian American struggle, they used to be linked together. And then representation politics beat our ass. This is a really interesting paper by Olivia Wong that goes over a lot of this stuff about colonialism and neocolonialism, about the difficulties of identity and how those things are submerged in. For instance, things like the complexity of how Asians figure their own identity relative to the colonial identities that were created in the 19th and 20th century. The ways in which generations affect this, the ways in which identity colors, the ways in which Japanese imperialism colored identity for a lot of different parts of Asia, right? Again, whole separate conversation once we actually break down what Asian even means. There's a lot there. And of course, I have to mention the GOAT, Yuri Kochiyama, who was one of, again, the founding activists for Asian America, for the Asian American movement. We helped found that movement as a response to and in solidarity with the Black American struggle movement, who was there and who was holding Malcolm X in her arms when he was shot to death, who was a key supporter of the Puerto Rican independence movement, who was affiliated with multiple Black nationalist organizations like the Organization of Afro-American Unity. All these folks are your history, man. You can connect with them. The fact that you have a white parent doesn't mean that you can't connect with them. As a matter of fact, you really need to, because they will help you understand the things that you're suffering from far more than just getting representation in a music video. Through understanding these histories, you can study, okay, what's the imperialism that put Asian people in this position? What is this racism against Asian people founded on? How is it connected to that colonialism? How is it connected to capitalism? All of that shit. This Republic of Wasia shit, it was fun. I got the Mitski shirt today, okay? I have the Mitski t-shirt today. Where's it say? See how it says Mitski here? I have the Mitski t-shirt today. There are many Wasians that I think are great. I think it's fine to think there's something fun or interesting about seeing people who have had similar ethnic backgrounds and perhaps similar life experiences as a result and who are racialized in similar ways. I get it. This is not it. You have to have political education. You have to have a political connection and historical education when it comes to your movements about ethnic backgrounds, or else you're just going to reproduce the same systems over and over again. Okay? Are you saying you don't want to be the king of North Wasia? I'm saying abolish wasia. As tempting as it is, Prosy Rose, I don't think I will. I think I'll have to turn it down.